Good morning, fight fans. Back with another episode of Mike's MMA Picks Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown. We've got UFC Rochester this evening. 13 fights, which is great for DraftKings purposes. We probably won't see many ties up at the top of the leaderboard. Great fights. We'll kick things off right away. First up, in the men's 145-pound division, we have Julio Arce taking on Giles-Cummings. Julio Arce, we know from the Contender Series, has some impressive victories. When you take a look at his win over Dan Ige, that, I believe, is looking better and better. I was at his fight against Shaman Moraes, which was a blood and guts effort. Came up short, split decision. I actually thought Moraes could have taken a unanimous decision there. We have Arce's taking on Giles-Cummings, right? So Giles-Cummings is plus 600 underdog. We'll cut to the chase. I don't see Erosa having much of a shot here. Erosa, second lowest priced fighter on DraftKings at 6,600. Both fighters are 25 years of age, 29 years of age for that matter. This fight is not expected to go to a decision at minus 150. One thing you'll notice also, Giles-Cummings has a 4.5-inch reach advantage. Problem here is that Erosa does not take damage well. So I'm looking for Arce to get on the inside, close distance, use his boxing. It's very crisp boxing. And also, we do have a few Tiger Schulman's fighters here. Arce is one of them. Mike Trizano is the other. These guys have been in camp for a while with Jimmy Rivera. I know Rivera hasn't looked great recently, but we also have Shane Burgos there and a few other fighters. So this minus 750 favorite, Julio Arce, is my pick here. That's not really going out on a limb. It's just a matter of how he gets it done. I actually see him finishing here. Next up, we have Trevin Giles taking on Zach Cummings. Zach Cummings has really taken a deep dive here. I remember when he was hyped up prior to taking on Thiago Alves, a lot of people made plays on him, and then he slipped getting into the tub when he was preparing for weigh-ins, and they had to scratch that fight. Ended up taking on Michel Prazeres and did not look good in that fight. Now comes in against Trevin Giles here, an undefeated fighter who's only 26 years old. Giles minus 155 at the betting window. Zach Cummings on the comeback plus 145. Zach Cummings, 34 years of age. He's a bulldog, though. This fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 150. 8,400, you've got Trevin Giles, who's in that mid-range. My take on this fight, if you look back at Trevin Giles' past few fights in 2017, he's 2 years removed from his decision win over Ryan Spenn, and that was a very close fight. This is a big step up in competition for Giles. I'm leaning to Giles here, but there are better options when you're playing DraftKings. So scope it out. I'm not ruling out Giles finishing here, although Cummings hasn't been finished recently. This fight is at middleweight. These guys do pack heavy punches, so we'll see. But I'm leaning Giles. Next up, we have an interesting fight in the men's 205-pound division, light heavyweights here. Patrick Cummins and Ed Herman. Yes, Pat Cummins and Ed Herman. Both of these guys, 38 years old. We have Cummins at 8,800. That's pretty risky. Herman has power. Herman, we know how desperate he is. Herman's had 3 ACL repairs. I'm concerned about his takedown defense. Patrick Cummins keeps himself in great shape. I ran into him a couple of cards ago when he was out of camp, and he was still in phenomenal shape. This fight is expected to go to a decision at -140. This fight should be a very ugly fight. I could see Cummins landing a lot of takedowns, though, so that's something that you want in DK. The problem is Cummins, at the end of the first round of most fights, he's beaten and battered. And the Vellante fight, when Herman fought Vellante recently, neither fighter even thought about taking that fight to the ground. This fight, Herman has a decent guard, but I'm leaning Cummins here. I think -240 is a very high price to pay. It's a closer fight than odds suggest. My preferred play is Cummins, but you can't really trust Ed Herman. He's been out of the game for a while, and this guy, he took a construction job and was not really into. He's not sure what he's going to do, and you want a fighter who's focused on the task at hand. He seems like he's ready to collect a paycheck. So Cummins is going to be the pick here. Next up, we have, this is my personal main event of the evening. We've got Mike Trizano taking on Grant Dawson. Men's 145-pound division. Grant Dawson, -150 favorite. This is a benefit. One of the benefits of doing this fight morning breakdown is that we get to see these odds move late, and we also get to see fighters on the scales. Grant Dawson didn't look great on the scales. I know it wasn't that tough of a cut for him. And Trizano is dropping down from lightweight. Tiger Schulman's product. Trizano, 27 years of age. Trizano's both of these guys are in that mid tier. 8,300 for Trizano, 7,900 for Grant Dawson. Grant Dawson, 13-1. We saw when he did get his only loss, he was finished by elbows against the cage. This is going to be a very close fight. Trizano, I got to be honest. I went into this fight before doing any tape. I was on Grant Dawson. And then after watching the tape, I left realizing that Mike Trizano is the much more technical fighter, especially when it comes to stand-up. His get-up game is pretty darn good. And when I watch Grant Dawson after he gets takedowns, he doesn't really do much with them besides try to posture up and land ground and pound. Granted, that's most of the time that's what you want to do, but I don't see him being that successful transitioning and passing guard. Even if he does, Trizano has some decent sweeps. He looks good against the cage, and the longer this fight goes, Dawson, I see him emptying his tank again as he did in the Erosa fight. Trizano can take damage well. We saw that in the Pena fight. That was at 155 pounds. Pena obviously is a massive lightweight. So at these odds, I think it's worth a play on Trizano. This fight, I wouldn't be shocked if this fight ends inside of the distance with Trizano finishing the fight. Grant Dawson's going to push that pace, and I understand from a DraftKings perspective why folks want to roster him. And this could nip a lot of people in the butt if they fade Dawson, because Dawson's going to bring those takedowns. He's high volume. He's a pressure fighter, but he's also prone to making mistakes on the feet. So this fight is going to be one that I'll be targeting. Should be a great fight. I have a slight lean to the underdog here. but I understand. I understand why folks are interested in Dawson. One other side note here: I was looking into Dawson's wrestling credentials, and in his senior year, he ended up going 40-8, and he was wrestling at 160 pounds. This is in Wisconsin. And I heard that he was recruited by some top schools in the country, but he didn't choose to go the college route. So I know his wrestling's strong. I don't want to get too hung up on this fight, but I see Trizano being the sharper fighter and him pulling out a victory here. Next up, we have at the welterweight division, Michel Pereira against Hot Chocolate, Danny Roberts. Pereira, when you watch tape on this guy, it jumps off the screen at you, but it's deceiving because the level of opponents here are suspect. Somehow, at 25 years of age, this guy has a 22-9 record. He's been around the game a while. He's been very active. This fight's not expected to go to a decision at -195. Pereira's one of your lower priced fighters on the card at 7,300. Danny Hot Chocolate Roberts, 8,900. Roberts is a very active striker. If he goes to the ground, he knows what he's doing, but we don't typically want to see his fights play out down there. He showed some suspect fight IQ. He looked great during his fight with Mike Perry a few years ago, but then got caught late. Pereira does possess fight-ending power. I'm interested to see how this fight plays out. It's not expected to go to a decision, so this is a fight that I suggest targeting in DraftKings. Do yourself a favor, go to Tapology and look at the fighter records who Pereira fought against to try some of the stuff that he did in his last bout. I'm sure it got Dana White's attention, but it also shows me that he was in no threat. There was no threat from his opponent. And to be able to try stuff like that, backflips into an opponent's guard, interesting stuff. So Danny Roberts is going to be my pick here, but I don't have much confidence in him. He's coming off of his win over Claudio Silva, where the referee thought he tapped, but he yelped in agony, and that was the determining factor. So Roberts is going to be the pick here, but Pereira may be a live dog. He's going to come out gunslinging. This was the one weigh-in that folks should have paid attention to. Both of these guys got pretty heated, and it seemed like they wanted to throw hands right away. And I think that's the way the fight will start out also. These guys will engage. Next up, we have a hometown fight. Des Green at the men's 155-pound division. We got lightweights on our hands. 22-8 record, Des Green, -750 favorite. This line opened much lower. Now it's up to -750. Taking on Charles Jourdain. Charles Jourdain +600 underdog. Charles Jourdain is a double champ, fighting out of the TKO organization. 6,700 in DraftKings. Charles Jourdain, only 23 years old. He looks undersized for lightweight. I know he fought at bantamweight as well. I think he's completely outmatched here. The only way I see Charles Jourdain winning this fight is by some sort of spinning attack. Des Green, he can go to his wrestling here. I think I know a lot of people are shying away from Des Green from a DraftKings perspective because of his inability to finish fights, and there is some recency bias with Des Green beating Ross Pearson by TKO. But Des Green, he can finish fights. He just chooses not to. He chooses not to engage. I think in this fight, We saw him, I'm not sure if he got a bonus in the last event, but he may be hunting for a bonus here, and also look to impress the hometown crowd. I think we're going to see Des Green here finish this fight. And at 9,500, you're going to be looking for, you have great options up top, but who's going to produce the most points? I'm not sure if Giles-Jourdain will be able to absorb the punishment that Des Green could potentially dish out. Des Green could land multiple takedowns here and get a late finish. But either way, my pick is Des Green. Next up, we have a rematch, but this time in the women's 135-pound division. We've got Aspen Ladd taking on Ladd-Eubanks. Ladd-Eubanks is plus 280 right now, an underdog. That's a very wide line. I think this fight's closer than the odds indicate. Aspen Ladd minus 310. Aspen Ladd only 24 years of age. Ladd-Eubanks is 10 years her elder. Eubanks has a 1-inch reach advantage. This fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 205. Aspen Ladd 9,100 in DraftKings. Aspen Ladd tends to march forward. I don't like what I see in her stand-up, despite possessing some power. I don't like what I see there. I know she's very dominant on top. Ladd-Eubanks should not be slept on, especially her stand-up. Eubanks working with Mark Henry in New Jersey. She's a black belt. I was actually at her last fight against Roxanne Modafferi, and she missed weight in that fight. She has a history of missing weight. This time she's moving up a weight class, and Aspen Ladd should be the bigger fighter. But my take on it is that Eubanks can land striking here. She does possess power, and Aspen Ladd does not move her head at all. She's there to be hit. So one of the underdogs I'm leaning towards on this card is Eubanks. I won't have a play on her, but I think that she has a legitimate shot at victory here. I think Aspen Ladd still has holes in her game at 24 years old. I think she has room for growth. And she appears, we saw her in her last fight. She was bulked up in the Evander fight. She looks very bulked up here. But this is against a different opponent. And I see this fight being a very close decision. Could go either way. Next up, we have at the men's lightweight division, Austin Hubbard, LFA champ, 27 years of age, fighting out of Team Elevation in Colorado with the likes of Corey Sandhagen, Neil Magny, etc. He's not going to have Neil Magny this time around. Taking on Davi-Ramos. Davi-Ramos, amazing jiu-jitsu practitioner, built like a fire hydrant. Reminds me of Rusamar Paharis, his build. Davi-Ramos, 9,200. Had a lackluster UFC debut when he took on Sergio Moraes. This fight, Austin Hubbard's going to be looking to keep distance, pepper with the jab, and try to – I'm thinking he's going to try to win on points here, but it's a dangerous fight. Originally, this line, I believe, opened at minus 160 was the fight does not go the distance. Now it's up to minus 225. Davi-Ramos, minus 440 at the betting window. What are you going to get here? You're probably going to get a takedown from Ramos. You're probably going to get some transitions, and then you're probably going to see a submission of the rear naked choke variety. That's what I see happening. Austin Hubbard was I was watching an interview, I believe it was with James Lynch, where he said that he could not sleep for weeks after his fight was announced, that this is a huge step up. And I understand, that the trepidation when you're going to step into the octagon with somebody of the caliber of Ladd-Eubanks, who has a incredible submission game. And I think that that's what's going to happen here. So to make a long story short, Ladd-Eubanks is my pick. We've got another rematch up next, folks. We've got a men's lightweight fight between Nick-Lentz and Charles Oliveira. Nick-Lentz plus 305 at the betting window. Charles Oliveira minus 335. Charles Oliveira 9,300 from DraftKings, one of the higher priced options. Who with this fight should end inside the distance. Right now, those odds are sitting at minus 275. Nick-Lentz 6,900. Nick-Lentz tough guy to finish. Actually lost some money last time he fought against Scott Holtzman. This guy, Nick-Lentz, 39-2, 30 wins, 9 losses, and 2 draws on his record. He's seen success since joining Henry Hoof and leaving American Top Team. Charles Oliveira seems to be really coming into his own, folks. Very impressive victories. Sometimes he isn't as impressive when he leaves Brazil. That's a concern of mine. He's heading to upstate New York. Should be motivated, though. Oliveira has a 6-inch reach advantage here. He's been using his stand-up more often. He's got a decent Muay Thai. And we know he's got that great submission game. Incredible. He's one of the few fighters who I haven't seen fight live in person. One of my favorites. I have some slight reservations playing this fight. I know many people will be on Oliveira. This is the 3rd time these guys have fought. They know each other well. I think Nick-Lentz is going to hang in there for a while. And I wouldn't be surprised if he makes this a close fight. I lean the outcome being Charles Oliveira by submission. I believe that's around minus 200 or so right now. I wouldn't play those odds. But the pick's going to be Oliveira. And when you're looking for those lower priced underdogs, keep an eye out for Nick-Lentz. I think he has a lot of fight in him. Tough guy to put away. This is another fight we have coming up next that I've had my eyes on since a late notice replacement was brought to the table. Green-Jourdain plus 775, plus 775. 31-year-old LFA fighter, journeyman. 6,500 from a DraftKings perspective. The cheapest fighter on the board, taking on Vicente Luque. Luque, man, this kid, well deserving of his nickname. He is an assassin. He is minus 975, 27 years of age. He has a 2-inch reach advantage over Krantz. 9,400 with for Luque. I think we'll see Luque being the highest owned fighter on the board between him and Oliveira. But I actually think we may see Luque outscore Oliveira, because if Oliveira wins, sometimes he just lands that submission and he doesn't rack up a lot of significant strikes. He did in the Timur fight, but against Lentz, he may go for the submission early again. Luque, he can throw hands. He's got a great jiu-jitsu game. We saw what he's made of in the Barberena fight. Barberena, holy cow. What can you say about him? That guy's tough as nails, though he did sustain a life-changing beating in that last fight. Barberena did. Luque throws. He's got some beautiful striking, decent kicks, decent takedowns. And the only thing I think he has to worry about here is the heavy hands of Krantz. A lot of these late notice fights that happen, I am concerned when they step in, because I think of Benny Dariush against Alex Hernandez. I think of Carlos Diego Ferreira against Kyle Nelson. there are a few others that come to mind, but when you take on these guys who have nothing to lose and they're coming swinging heavy punches, sometimes they do connect and they catch an opponent who isn't ready for what's coming. And Luque may play this fight safe. Originally, the odds for this fight for Luque to finish inside the distance, it opened at -195. He might be up to -270 or something like that right now. But I think we'll see. I think we'll see Luque. I mean, Krantz can pick his poison here. He could get taken down and mounted and pounded out. He could get knocked out. How about that Jalen Turner fight? Holy smokes, that was very impressive. Luque is one of my favorite fighters to watch, so I have Vicente Luque winning that fight. Krantz, though, he has that home run ability. You may want to play one Krantz lineup, see what happens with it. The guy does have 24 wins under his belt. All right, we're on to the main card here with Megan Anderson taking on Felicia Spencer. Felicia Spencer, what can you say about her? She's got a decent wrestling game. She's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She's a big girl, 28 years of age, fighting out of Canada. She's one of those underdogs you definitely want to take a look at 7,700. Taking on Megan Anderson, who 29 years of age, out of Australia, coming off of a win over Kat Zingano, where, man, I had a play on Kat Zingano. I was hoping that fight would have gone longer because we saw that Megan Anderson, I know she's shown her takedown defense to be an issue. Let's see if she shored that up. She should have a tremendous size advantage here. At 8,500, from a DraftKings perspective, you could see a stand-up affair if Anderson is able to keep Spencer away, land elbows, land strikes, land knees. That may be a path to victory for Anderson. I'm afraid that if Spencer lands this takedown early, Anderson may not be getting up for the entirety of the round. Right off the bat, when watching tape, I noticed Spencer has a very heavy top game. And if she's smart, that's what she'll be looking to do right off the bat. Close distance, make this ugly. But Spencer, she's not a great athlete. And I believe she's a teacher in the offseason. Anderson is a glorified Instagram model who trains often. She keeps herself in phenomenal shape. This fight, I don't understand the line movement, why the odds got so wide here, but I think this fight is also closer than odds suggest. Big money has come in on Anderson, so the sharp folks appear to be on her. Spencer, I believe, is a live dog, though. This fight is not expected to go to a decision, so I believe that you want to keep an eye on this fight and target it from a DraftKings point of view. Just do this with caution, though, because if Spencer lands the takedowns, you're not going to see a lot of productivity from Megan Anderson. Okay. The pick here is going to be Megan Anderson, but I'm not a fan of hers. I do hope she loses, but you got to keep the emotions out of it. And I'd like to see Spencer come through here, but Spencer's at such a physical disadvantage here that I think that the longer the fight goes, Anderson should run away with this one. Next up, the co-main event, we have Tremendous, tremendous matchup between Antonio Carlos Jr. Shoeface against Ian the Hurricane Heinisch. We know Ian Heinisch's story now. He was a drug mule who was incarcerated multiple times across different continents. Antonio Carlos Jr., amazing high-level black belt, fighting out of American Top Team. Ian Heinisch is in Colorado. Ian Heinisch, great athlete, former all-state wrestler who is incredibly tough, has shown a tremendous depth when it comes to perseverance. He was incarcerated at Rikers for a long time, but when you're incarcerated at Rikers, I don't think they have a mixed martial arts program in there. When you're an inmate. Overseas, though, Ian Heinisch was able to get some wrestling in while he was incarcerated. We'll put the past behind us. Let's look at what we have right now. This fight is not expected to go to a decision at minus 205. Heinisch is actually the older fighter by a year. Carlos Jr., Shoeface, has a huge reach advantage. Shoeface has to be careful here when it comes to striking, because Heinisch does possess a big overhand right. He feints, he closes distance, and he looks to land a big bomb. If Heinisch comes out here and looks to close distance, he may run into a buzzsaw with ACJ, and Shoeface may just lock up a submission early. Something folks should recognize also when taping this fight is that in Antonio Carlos Jr.'s fourth fight, that's where he started in the UFC. He only trained mixed martial arts. He started training mixed martial arts in 2013. So he had a very, very quick turnaround, and he was thrown to the wolves. He fought Miranda, Lex Luthor, in his UFC debut. We saw him wilt under the pressure of Dan Kelly and Patrick Cummins. He's fought at 205 pounds, now is dropping down to 185. Massive 185er. Antonio Carlos Jr. fighting under the tutelage of Dean Thomas, soaking up a lot, boxing with Junior Dos Santos, who speaks very highly of Antonio Carlos Jr. So the far superior technical fighter here is Antonio Carlos Jr. Toughness is going to keep Ian Heinisch in this fight. Also, his wrestling pedigree and his power. This is going to be a real test. I've seen a lot of people having plays on Ian Heinisch. I totally understand where they're coming from, but I think there's a discrepancy in skill set here, and I believe Antonio Carlos Jr., if he doesn't get knocked out, should win this fight more often than not. And I believe he should be a wider favorite at this price. I believe he's sitting at minus 170. But we have to take everything into account here, and there is proof that Antonio Carlos Jr. has faded late in fights. He may fade again. Ian Heinisch does not go away. Antonio Carlos Jr. may have to render Ian Heinisch unconscious during this bout. My pick here is going to be Antonio Carlos Jr., but I understand the reservations. And when you're pricing this from a DraftKings perspective, there are a number of fighters who are hovering around the 8,700, 8,800, 8,900. You have Roberts at 8,900. We have to really use our critical thinking skills when making decisions as far as lineup construction goes. Heinisch at 7,500 really opens things up top. and you want to get as many of those higher priced fighters as you can, who have the ability to finish. And the higher priced fighters also, you'll see there's a discrepancy in skill set up there. So the play for me is 8,700, Antonio Carlos Jr. Now we have main event of the evening. We have two lightweights who have moved up to 170 pounds. We have Rafael dos Anjos taking on Kevin Lee. Incredible fight. Incredible fight here. Kevin Lee right now sitting at a plus 100 underdog, taking on Dos Anjos, who's sitting at minus 110 at the betting window. Kevin Lee, 8,000 in DraftKings. You've got Rafael dos Anjos, 8,200. We see Kevin Lee has a 5.5-inch reach. Kevin Lee, we saw him wilt later on in his fight with Al Iaquinta. Rafael dos Anjos has been through a meat grinder recently with Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, and I really liked what I saw in the Robbie Lawler fight, despite Robbie Lawler having a suffering a torn ACL during that fight. Not half his fault that happened, but he did what he had to do over 5 rounds. Dos Anjos isn't going to go away. He's going to have to be finished in this fight. The longer this fight goes, rounds 3, 4, and 5, Dos Anjos tends to come on strong. Kevin Lee should come out and get an early lead, may make for some live wagering opportunities. Though there's a big age difference here. There's a big experience difference here. I think this fight's going to be very, very close. I understand why folks may want to stack this fight, especially in cash. The only problem you may run into, though, is if Rafael dos Anjos gets stuck on bottom for a while, he's not going to be scoring points. And if somehow Kevin Lee is able to secure a submission, which he's capable of doing, we may have an issue there. But very, very close fight. Initially, when I first looked at this fight, I was picking Rafael dos Anjos, but as I dug a little bit deeper, this is much closer than I anticipated. I believe that Kevin Lee, he's going to have to find his confidence. What he showed in the Barbosa fight, if he can bring that same type of intensity and confidence as far as striking goes, and also his grappling prowess, then he's going to be at a huge, not a huge, but he'll have a slight advantage here. Rafael dos Anjos, I think we may see him start to show some of his scars here. The guy has been battered and beaten. Every time I hear his Bloodsport introduction, he's one of the few guys who come into the octagon with his Bloodsport intro. I'm a huge fan of Rafael dos Anjos, but I'm going to lean towards Kevin Lee in this matchup. I just think that Kevin Lee may be too strong, maybe too quick, maybe too fast. Dos Anjos is going to have those leg kicks. I believe he has an edge in the jiu-jitsu department. This fight probably will go to a decision, but I'm leaning slightly to Kevin Lee here, the underdog. I understand folks wanting to roll with Dos Anjos, and I may have shares of Dos Anjos out there as well, especially considering the odds. But my pick here is going to be Kevin Lee. We're almost at 40 minutes, folks, so hope you enjoyed the podcast. You can find me at MMAOddsBreaker, also at CapperTech, as well as betmma.tips. And you can follow me on Twitter at MikesMMAPicks. Want to wish everybody a great fight morning, a wonderful afternoon, and a pleasant evening. Enjoy UFC Rochester.